Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of October. Today we have some updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with our Kupiansk front line, with this area. To tell the truth, we can say that today we have almost the same updates as we have yesterday, but a little bit other numbers, a little bit other title of the towns, but the situation is the same. The Russians reported that they attacked 19th, 92nd and 14th Mechanized Brigade near Kupiansk, as they did yesterday, as they did the day before yesterday, as they did the day before yesterday, and so on. The only difference between the previous days is that, according to the latest numbers, this brigade lost around 50 soldiers and 10 armored vehicles. Furthermore, the 92nd Mechanized Brigade moved their reserves from Kupiansk, and the Russians spotted their reserves, attacked their reserves, and the 92nd Mechanized Reserve losses is around 60 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles. If you remember, yesterday there was almost the same story, but the Russians were saying that 14th Mechanized Brigade moved their reserves and their reserves were attacked and so on. So as you can see, the picture is the same. The Ukrainians are trying to find the solution, find a way how to, what to do next, if they are able to do anything next, or something like this. For now, this front line is stable. The Russians are moving more and more reserves every day. Another 100 of soldiers are getting on this territory, and so on. So the situation works in Russian favor. Anyway, if we are talking about Liman, or how the Russians call this town, Radliman, the same picture. The Ukrainians were trying to cross this river one more time with commandos. One more time the Russians spotted the Ukrainian commandos, attacked those commandos, 4 commandos in this area. There is an icon of this right in front of the road between Svatova and Kremina. The Ukrainians are trying to establish control over the road that connects Svatova and Kremina, and the only way how can they do this is to send their commandos and scouts and to attack some single convoys, single trucks, single supply route, and so on. So those commandos were spotted by the Russians and were destroyed, and the Russians reported that as a result of that attack, the Ukraine lost around 17 soldiers and something around 2 armored vehicles with machine gun in this area. So no more updates on this area, no more updates, and let's see if the Ukrainians will decide to cross this area. The only update that is not connected with the front line, with the battles, is that today, somewhere the second half of the day, we got a video from Kupiansk region, from this area. According to the Ukrainian sources, there was a video, it's about Ukrainian sources, there were a video how the Russians killed civilians and then they dropped those civilians from the hill, like down to the lowland. But the thing is that this video, according to the metadata, you know that it's very easy to check and understand where this or that video was created. And according to that metadata that this video had, this video was recorded today somewhere at 2 p.m. and was published at 3 p.m. of local time. And according to that information, we can say that this video was created by the Ukrainians, and the main idea of that video, that Ukrainians were killing a lot of civilians in Kupiansk with a very, we can say, Hitler manner, as it was in 1942, 1943. They killed a lot of civilians and they dropped them into some kind of, I don't know, some kind of lowland, and that's it. It's a very terrible video. I suppose maybe a lot of people have seen this video. Terrible situation. Now we're moving to Seversk, Slaviansk, and Bakhmut triangle, to this area. The Russians reported that Ukrainians were trying to do some local counteroffensive operation in this area. They were attacking all along the front line, but all their attempts were defeated. And the Russians reported that as a result of those attacks, the Ukraine lost around 120 soldiers and 21 armored vehicles. But the thing is that the front lines are stable in this area as well. The only update we can see from Bakhmut, as you can see, the Russian source map has been updated. Now the green line is very close to the Bakhmut. according to this map, we see that the towns on the south, on the north of Gorlovka and the south of Bakhmut is under Russian control. Zaitsevo is under Russian control. Vesela Dolina, Tradovka, all these towns, and the Russians, I believe that in a week or in two, are going to start the real storm of Bakhmut itself. I think they need few weeks just for some purposes, like to establish control over Kurdyumovka, as we discussed, maybe over Klishivka, and of course the Russians need to do something with Solidar, because without Solidar it's highly unlikely to be very successful while storming Bakhmut. Because if we take a look at the Western sources map, you're gonna understand what I'm trying to explain to you. First of all, this is our Bakhmut. And as you can see, the Western source map has been updated as well. Now they're showing as well Zaitsev, Vesela Dolina under Russian control. But according to the Russian sources, they control this territory. So this blue cloud is also under Russian control. And Zaitsev on the south from this area as well. So these two clouds is under Russian control, and now the Russians are moving towards Kurdyumovka and towards Kishinovka, these two towns. And from this area, the Russians will be able to do one important thing, is to cut the road that connects Chasov Yar and Bakhmut by establishing some kind of fire control. But anyway, the Ukrainians still have possibility to use road MO3, this one for supply support. Of course, the Ukrainians still have a lot of local roads that they can use to support Bakhmut, so that's why for this purpose I don't know how the Russians are planning to do this, but anyway, in the next 2-3 weeks they need to do something with Solidar and to take control over this area. And let's say from Blagodatne, from this bridgehead, the Russians will be able to establish fire control over road MO3, and only after that, after these two operations from the south and from the north, they will have a lot of chances to establish control over Bakhmut and to reduce their own losses as much as possible. But for now, the Russians have achieved some success just on the south. And if we're talking about Solidar, there is no progress in this area. The Ukrainians still control the, let's say, the west-north part of Solidar without even the chances for the Russians to cross this area. If we're talking about this entire area, as I told you, 120 soldiers during the previous 20 hours were lost from the Ukrainian side and around 21 armored vehicles. Now let's move to the Donetsk-Zaporozhye area. The Russians achieved some success near Pervomayskaya. They're moving in the direction of Nivolskaya, Pervomayskaya, and this map is not updated, but the Russians control a lot more territories than we can see on this map. According to the latest updates we have, the Russians control something like this in Pervomayskaya, and that's a lot. And now they are able to attack Vodyane from the back in this area. And from this position, we see that Nivolskaya, the Ukrainian artillery position, is cut off from the mainland. And I believe that the next weeks, 1 or 2 are also going to see some storm operation over this Ukrainian checkpoint as well. This is not some kind of strategic achievements, it's just a tactical achievements, but anyway, every single square meter that the Russians are able to take from around Donetsk means that the Ukrainians artillery are forced to move back at the same square meters, and every single square meters is lives and civilians and casualties among civilians in the capital of DPR. If we are talking about Zaporozhye area, the Ukrainians made few attempts of storming in this area. Maybe they were trying to understand the situation, the Russians' position, and so on. But all those attempts were failed, and the Russians reported that during those counteroffensive operations in the Zaporozhye area, the Ukraine lost around 100 soldiers and 13 armored vehicles. And I'm talking about Ugledar, let's say, front line. Because if we're talking about Zaporozhye, that's Orekhov, Guliai-Polye front line, there are no changes at all. We expect some counter-offensive operation in this area in direction of Tokmak or Zaporozhye power plant, but for now the Ukrainians haven't done any step in this direction. Now we're moving to Kherson district. The Russians gave us some numbers about the situation in this area. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, the total losses of the Ukrainians on 2 front lines in this area is around 300 soldiers and more than 50 armored vehicles. For now, we can say that there are three front lines. The first one is the front line, let's say, between Andreevka, Bilogorka, Davidbrody, and Duchany. This is the first front line. The second front line is Andreevka, Davidbrody, Snigirivka. This is the second front line. And the third one is between Nikolaev and Kherson. If we're talking about the front line between Nikolaev and Kherson, there are no changes. The situation is stable, no movements. But if we're talking about Andreevka, Bridgehead, there's the area on the left and the right side from Davidbrody, the Ukrainians made few attempts to penetrate the Russian defense, but all their attempts were defeated by the Russians, failed. And as I told you, the losses on these two front lines were more than 300 soldiers and more than 50 armored vehicles. But anyway, the front lines on this side of Ukrainian situation are stable as well. So as you can see, the times is coming, the time is running in Russian favor. They're moving more and more forces, and anyway, sooner or later, we're going to see the Russians' counteroffensive operation. Maybe the Ukrainians calculated everything, they understood everything, and the most important thing the Ukrainians understood is that they are no longer able to do any counteroffensive operation in this area anymore. Their attempt of destroying the supply road between Crimea and Russian Federation failed, and now they understand that they need to prepare fortifications and trenches on the new territory that they managed to establish control over, like Kharkiv area, like the north of Kherson district, because very soon, somewhere in the middle of November, maybe in the beginning of December, the Russians will try to take this territory back. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good weekend. Bye bye.